Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. Tom Christie here, and David with me. We're going to talk about ShadowDark, and this is the Kickstarter page I have shared on the screen. They're up to 928,000 pledged for the game, so they're going to probably break 1 million with 11 days left to go. And it's really interesting of how successful it's been and how much it drew me in when I looked at it. I was in no way involved with it at all beforehand. In fact, the free previews have been out for quite a while now, I found out. When I first heard about it, I went and checked it out, and it really grabbed my attention. Really, the layout, the super concise writing, the feel of everything, old school rules with new school, more modern ways of doing things, which I liked and appreciated. I mean, I've played D&D since 1979, so I have plenty of saves versus death and saves versus rod staff wand experience, and I didn't necessarily want to go back to that, but this one really kind of drew me in. What are your thoughts, David?
Right. The success of this is just amazing, considering that there's been other games that have kind of mined the same territory. I have a game over here on the shelf called Into the Unknown, which was also another game that tried to capture some of that simpler old school feel using the 5th edition rule set. Now, ShadowDark says they don't use the 5th edition rule set, but of course there's plenty of mechanics all through it that show its 5th edition roots. But ShadowDark has been a unprecedented success, and I think it combines an appetite for this sort of thing in the wake of the OGL kerfluffle and the skill that they put together the Kickstarter with really snazzy looking graphics and production and a knack for promotion, and everything seems to be a perfect storm where they're getting a really amazing amount of promotion. And that's good for folks who are interested in playing this sort of game, because you can find more players and really interest them. Whereas if I'm looking for players who are interested in playing, say, Castles and Crusades, I'm going to have a little bit steeper hill to climb to get them into that kind of old school thing if they're coming from a 5th edition world.
Right, and they have a Discord of their own too, so if you're looking for games, you can go onto their Discord. They have that in the back of, I think, the player's guide gives you the link to the Discord page. And let's take a look at, it's also drawing the attention of some third-party people already jumping in. I'm going to share this screen here. So this is Sursa Victory, and Sursa's done some pretty amazing 5th edition adventures. David, you've run a couple of them, I believe, the tournament-style adventures.
Yes.
I was getting ready to run one, and I've run those in the past, and they're just really kind of this style of play, very deadly, very exploration-centric, and, kind of lends themselves well to the ShadowDark Adventure series. And this one looks really good. It's for 3rd level characters, so it'd be a stepping off point for after you finish the adventure. That comes free in the Game Master's Guide and carries on with the traditions for the ShadowDark formatting, even mapping and layout of the rooms. This is one thing that really drew me in, was how the rooms were laid out, how the room descriptions are done, much more in a technical manual style than in a long narrative style, which I very much appreciate. I remember the 2nd edition of Dungeons & Dragons, it got horrendous, where there's just pages and pages of box text, and this is very far away from that. So that was another thing that really drew me in. And then we also have Elven Tower has just talked about how they're going to be supporting ShadowDark. It'd be interesting to see what that means. Are they going to be doing their maps black and white, color? ShadowDark doesn't have to be black and white, but that is the aesthetic of the book that's out and the book that's coming out.
Those sample maps look like they're in color. That would fit with Elven Tower's work. They do a lot of nice maps, and then they do adventures that are fairly concise that go along with those maps. I haven't explored the adventures much, but their maps are always great looking, and I think this makes a lot of sense as a direction. We'll see how much of an appetite there is for ShadowDark third-party stuff.
And then David, you just did a blog post about ShadowDark, and you guys can find that. I'll put a link in the description for the video below here. But what is the short URL for that, David?
Well, just go to dmdavid.com. It's the top post right now.
Very good.
Yeah.
All right. So let's take a look at the rules a little bit, and you can kind of zero in on some thoughts that you have about those. And before we do, what's over your shoulder there? What book's that?
Well, over my shoulder there is the rules compendium for the basic D&D product line that came out in 91, 92. It was the culmination of all those basic expert books, putting everything together. And a lot of folks think it was probably the ultimate edition of basic D&D, the line, before it got dropped. And the focus went first to Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and then to the new third edition that came in the wake of Wizards of the Coast purchase. So great book. You can buy it print on demand. This one comes from a library in Washington State. And what I love about this copy is that whoever checked it out of the library absolutely loved it and used it to almost exhaustion. And it's got sketches and notes and highlighters, and you can see little tab markings on the side of it. I love that patina of use. I mean, compared to a shrink-wrapped copy, there's something charming about this one.
One of our viewers, Mark, says, ShadowDark reminds me of a 5e equivalent of OSE with its layout and writing. Yeah, me too. I got the OSE stuff through a humble bundle. And so I have all the products, and I've been meaning to run that sometime here soon too. And I definitely want to get to it because I love the layout that they did. And then John says the design, artwork, and aesthetic drew me in. Same with me, John. All right, so let's look at the rule book here. This is the player quick start guide that you get with the, that you can go to Arcane Library's website and download for free right now. You can get the player guide and you get the GM guide with that. So if we look through the rules here, you have right at the very start, just like the basic rules of the game. And the gear slots, I really like how they're doing this. If you're going to make encumbrance a real thing, that you have to keep track of stuff, it's got to be really simple. I mean, I don't want to track how many gold pieces everything weighs and look at the back of the DMG way in the back there and try and find out what everything is. So I think this is really handy. What do you think of the gear slots and encumbrance, David?
I love it. That's essential for this style of play. You've got to be tracking encumbrance. You've got to have people making choices about what they bring into their delve, especially for torches and light sources. And they've also got to make choices about what loot is worth taking out, and sometimes leave some loot behind because it's not valuable enough. That's a whole resource management game that the modern D&D is pretty much ignores, and part of the reason is because it's too much complication and too much bookkeeping. So this is a really great system. It reminds me of a system that RuneQuest introduced way back in 1978, where they had essentially the same thing, where you could have a number of items equal to your strength. So I was charmed with the RuneQuest system, and I still love it here with ShadowDark.
All right, then for difficulty classes, you have basically 4 basic ones from DC 9 through DC 18. And since there are no skills and everything is an ability check, these are a little bit lower than you might expect in like a 5e game. And how is like proficiency and such handled? It's done with advantage or disadvantage on your rolls. So if you have a background like as a surgeon and you're trying to make a heal check, a DC 15, maybe you'll have advantage on the check. Or the other advice they give is that you adjust the DCs based on who's making the check. So a elf tracking someone through a forest on a sunny day might be easy, DC 9, whereas a troll whose skin and flesh is burning and can't see, squinting against the sun, it might be a DC 18. So there's 2 different ways you can adjust that difficulty. Morale is a huge thing because these characters are super not weak, but paper tigers. They can easily be brought down by most of the monsters in the dungeon. And so the party should be able to expect monsters to flee and not just fight to the death. Otherwise, it just would be a little too hard. So don't forget morale. Um, and then along with morale goes the reactions that the monsters will have to the party. Not every monster should be ready to attack on sight. There should be plenty of opportunity for the characters to kind of set monsters against each other or gain allies and not just make everything a straight enemy. Then dying, you have the death timer. So the first time it comes around to your turn after you've got knocked down to 0, you roll a d4 and add your con modifier to it. That tells you how many more rounds you have to live. And you die basically when that timer is up. Everything works on timers, which always count down on your turn. And this is one of them. And then on your turn, every subsequent round, you'd be making a straight d20 roll. And if you roll a 20, you rise with 1 hit point. The only other way to be saved is with healing or stabilizing at DC 15 intelligence. Any thoughts there, David?
Well, let's go through that one by one. First of all, using advantage for the difficulty and proficiency in rolls is a mechanic I kind of like, because it does help patch up some of the swinginess of a d20 die roll, so that folks who are enjoying advantage on certain checks that suit their character do have a little bit better consistency with having the success, especially within those sort of narrow bound of difficulty classes. So that's a good plus. Thieves, for example, get advantage on all the sort of thievely tasks that they might use. But beyond that, if you really want to go for the old school feel with this game, you're probably going to want to use those checks fairly sparingly for things where it's really undecided and you're okay kind of flipping a coin to see whether the character's success or fail. Because definitely these older school games, they lean into the notion that if you want to find a trap, the best way to determine whether somebody does it, say a pit, is to tap on the floor in front of them with a 10-foot pole. And that's how you do it. And the best way to look for a secret compartment in the bottom of a treasure chest is for somebody to look and say they're examining the bottom of the chest. So that tends to be the emphasis, and the rules do say that they recommend that sort of emphasis.
And a good thing they do in the rules is they say if a person does that, they find it.
Yep.
So if you're tapping, you should find it. It's not a perception check to find it. You just find it, which I like.
Absolutely. As for morale, in 5th edition, as a DM, I hate it when it's always a problem when the monsters break morale and run away, even though it very frequently makes sense. And it's a problem because 5th edition characters and players will tend to pursue monsters that try and run away. And instead of ending the fight quickly by having morale break, what you end up with is a lengthy chase scene while the characters pursue the monsters to get in those last blows. And the rules don't handle chases very well, so those drag on, and it's just quicker and plays better if the monsters fight to the death. But here in this game, with your characters so fragile and your experience points coming from the gold you win and so on, if the monster's morale breaks, it feels like a win, and the last thing you want to do is chase them. So it works out a lot better and helps keep the game focused on winning treasure as opposed to defeating every monster and making sure that nothing is left alive in your path.
Let me interject real quick on that. So with the way that actions are set up, you can actually flee. And in 5e, it's almost impossible to flee. So you get on your turn an action and a movement, or if you don't take an action, 2 moves. Well, and there's also no attacks of opportunity. So if you're in a fight with someone and you just 2 move away from them, then they can 2 move to chase you, but they don't get to attack you at the end of that, which is So you're basically able to run and run and run and never get attacked, as opposed to 5e where you get attacked every single round, either because they kept up with you and you provoke an attack of opportunity, or because you tried to disengage and you didn't get far enough away from them. So dying. We saw one character that was getting close to dying, and they were saved with a cure spell. It will be interesting to see how this plays out when our next character goes down, because with 5 characters getting to make DC 50 intelligence checks, there's a good chance someone will make it in one round, I would think. And there's no mechanic for just dying outright. Like if you take double your hit points, like in 5e, you just die outright. So it might actually be that dying is harder than I think, given that mechanic. What are your thoughts, David?
It could be, and you know, from my putting on my old school hat, that is a ridiculous indulgence. It just means the game is totally soft. But yeah, I that's fine. I think there's always going to be enough of a chance that everybody's going to fail their spell checks and their stabilization rolls when someone goes below 0, that you're not going to see this phenomenon in 5th edition where people say, well, I'm not going to heal anybody until they go below 0, because all those points that would have been negative below 0 are healed for free. So it's so much better just to let people drop on the battlefield.
Yeah.
I hate that dynamic. I can't imagine a real life D&D world where people are comfortable dropping to dying on the battlefield just because it seems more efficient to get healed up from there.
Right. You want to talk about role playing? That should be like the first role playing thing you do as a person, is like try to keep alive. So we got Solo Rambling said, I started with D&D in 1977-78 timeframe. Find ShadowDark to be a no-nonsense, streamlined blend of D&D rules, old and modern, with a sprinkle of homebrew rules. I agree. When did you start playing, David?
I believe in November of 1977.
Nice. I started in the fall of 79. I started with the, what was that basic book? That was the Blue Box Holmes edition? Was that it?
That would be the Holmes edition that
I think that's what I started with.
Yep.
Okay, so then we have distance and movement and ranges. So everything's either close, 5 feet away, or near 30 feet away, or far within sight. And if you're doing theater of the mind, that's all you need to do. If you're playing with a grid and you care about track and ranges, which I do, I play with a grid, works just fine with a grid. Basically, everything has a speed of 30. Everything with a range of near is up to 30 feet away. A lot of the spells are like near size cubes, quote unquote. So that'd be like a fireball would be 30 by 30. So pretty straightforward, pretty simple.
Mm-hmm.
Climbing, falling, everything's about the same. Moving through allies, you can move freely through allies. So 5e doesn't allow that. It's difficult terrain. The 1D&D playtest is moving that way. And after having played this, I'm happy with that.
It seems to work okay.
Yeah. I guess the only thing would be like a Congo line of like 4 people in a doorway. Can they all move to the doorway and attack and move back?
Right. And with opportunity attacks missing from the system, that is a potential issue that could come up, because you wouldn't face opportunity attacks. You could just have a queue of folks stepping up to take their turn and then ending the Congo line with the stoutest player in the party at the front. And that doesn't sound appealing to me.
No, I would probably do something along the lines like I do with the baton passing. You can't have a string of people 30 feet away, pass baton, and move that baton, 120, 180, 240 feet in a round. They can only move it the speed of the fastest one of them in a round. So the same thing, only one of them could attack through the doorway in a round, not 10 people attacking through a doorway in a round. So something like that, just use common sense and it'd probably take care of itself. Spell focusing and concentration is a thing. A spell will end, and we'll get to spellcasting in a second, which is pretty neat, I think, actually. So we'll skip that for now. Just move on into the game system itself. So come down here to repeating some of the same stuff that we had before. That first part was like an introduction. And we'll get to character generation. So here's your character generation. First level characters. Most games begin with first level characters. you get a background, you get stats, and stats are coming up here. Ancestry, class talents, hit points, and you get your constitution only for the first hit die. So it tempers the 18 constitution and it saves the 3 constitution a little bit.
Yes,
And
because my 7 Constitution thief would be unplayable if at every level he only had a 1 in 4 chance of getting 2 hit points instead of just 1.
Yeah. All right, so let's look at ability scores here. So 3d6 in order. Optionally, if none of your stats are 14 or higher, roll a new set. So this is a completely different way of playing than 5th edition or most games that are more recent than 1st edition. What do you think about it so far?
Well, I enjoy it. Back in the day, when people bragged about how good they were at playing role-playing games at D&D or role-playing games in general, this was the days when randomly generated characters were the norm, and a lot of what you boasted about for your playing skill was your ability to take a character that seemed hopeless or strange, that was created by the luck of the die rolls, and to make it into something successful or interesting. And this definitely goes back to that that sort of flavor. Instead of people talking about how well they built their character, it's how well you play the character you've got.
Yeah, some of my favorite adventuring is playing pre-gens and tournament style adventures. How can you make the most of the character that you got? And this system gives you kind of a randomized character. There's some choice in it, a little bit, but not a lot. A lot of your character is randomized. We got a comment from Ron Fraser. I've been playing since '87, so not quite so old school, but I love the sword and sorcery feel. ShadowDark captures that feel very well without the quirkiness of old school rule sets. Yeah, definitely agree on that. Okay, so let's look at the next page here. We got our stats. They're 3d6 in order. Now you got your ancestries, and each ancestry is less than a quarter of a page here. So that's how you can see the minimalistic design in this game. And each ancestry, it's got a very brief description, the languages it knows, and then like one special feature. What are your thoughts on that, Dave?
Seems good.
Yeah.
I see that they opted for class ancestry class system, like in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons of the era, rather than going for the basic D&D elf as a class kind of thing.
Right.
Probably a good choice.
Right. So the ramblings, what is really interesting in ShadowDark's style and page count, the lack of fluff and laser-focused rule has the book in 330 pages. Consider the size if it was full of fluff. Yeah. Now, also part of that is that they use a much bigger font and much more white space, which is nice to read as well.
There's not a lot of text there.
No, there's not a lot of text. So there's half-orc, there's human. Now we come to our first class, that being the fighter class. So the fighter and the other classes pretty much takes up one page. And if you recall through our history of like the old school D&D, fighters started out with a maximum strength of 18. And then they were quite clearly not as good as wizards. And they added 18 up to 1800 and gave them a little bit more oomph. And what that did in a big part was to give them the ability to carry a whole lot more stuff, which was important. When your XPs came from how much gold you got out of the dungeon. And that's kind of replicated with the hauler feature here, where they add their con modifier positive to the gear slots they carry, in addition to the fact that they can carry a lot of gear. And then weapon mastery is one of the only ways you can get bonuses to damage, which fighters can get. Most other classes or other talents give you a bonus to your attack roll, but not to your damage roll. And then grit gives them advantage on either strength checks or dex checks to overcome obstacles. And then here's the talents. So think of in 5th edition, when you look at a chart for a fighter, every level's got a feature that they get. Well, this is the same thing, except it's randomized. So in 5e, you might see 4 different ability score improvements, or for a fighter, there might be 6 ability score improvements. And here, the most common thing you're going to get is an ability score improvement, or you're going to get a bonus to attack. Those are on the cusp of the bell curve there for 2d6. And then less common are the things you might get once in a feature table in 5th edition. Gain weapon mastery with additional weapon, or this one's choose a talent or plus 2 points to any stat. So I really like that, and that's just more along the lines of these characters are randomized a little bit. You choose kind of the dressing of them, but the features are pretty randomized. Your thoughts there, Dave?
Yeah, again, this is a character that develops through play and to a large extent randomly. So you're working with the hand you pull.
And a big part of your character's abilities will be what stuff they find and what stuff they haul out of the dungeon. That'll determine a lot of their power.
To some extent, the story of your characters is the magic and gear that they found during the play.
Yep. Okay, then we got a priest class, and this is the first class that has spellcasting. So we'll take a look at that. They know the turn undead, and turn undead's a spell, and it doesn't count towards the number of known spells. And their spells, there are 5 levels / tiers of spells. So you'll get Wish at tier 5. And you'll see character levels go 1 through 10. And I don't think that's just a quick start thing. I think they're going to be 1 through 10 across the whole edition, since you're going to be getting tier 5 spells, which include Wish, by levels 9 and 10. You can see how many spells you get here with slots. And there's no cantrips. So at first you might think, well, shoot, I have 2 spells to cast, then I'm done. But we'll get to how spellcasting works in a little bit, in that you can keep casting spells as long as you're successful. And you only stop casting when you fail a check on a spell. So if you had Cure Wounds, you could cast Cure Wounds over and over and over again until you fail a spellcasting check on Cure Wounds. So it kind of makes every spell a little bit like a cantrip. Then we have the Thief class. And like David said, advantage on all the checks that involve thievery type stuff. And thieves have backstabbing. Instead of being able to just attack someone adjacent to an ally and getting bonus dice of damage, they actually have to be hidden to get the bonus dice of damage. So that makes it a little bit more rare and makes thieves a little bit more focused on the skills aspect of the game. And with combat being less rare too, hopefully when combat does start, they'll be hidden and they'll get that sneak attack in when they need to. And then of course, halflings have that huge bonus of the halfling racial trait of being able to be invisible, which will guarantee them the sneak attack if they want it. Then we got wizards, who have all the languages in the world and can learn spells from scrolls and have a little bit more spells than priests do. And then we have the titles that harken back to 1st edition. And interject anytime you want here, David. Alignment is chaotic, lawful, neutral. That's all the way back to the original version, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Pulling from Poul Anderson. And 3 Hearts for 3 Lions. Might have gotten that title wrong, but that's kind of the pioneer of it.
The deities are very short and sweet. There's 4 neutral / lawful deities. There's 3 chaotic deities, and then there's 2 lost deities. So with just a super compact section on deities, there's so much story elements that you can have here. Just the whole game feels this way to me, where it's like really concise, but full of character.
Yeah, just a little tangent on that. So some folks might think, wow, it's so short. It doesn't seem like a lot of work went into it. But as somebody who does a lot of writing, I can tell you it is far harder to write something short and concise than it is to write something expansive and just sort of goes on and on and on. So that's a real sign of a lot of thought and work went into this product.
A couple more comments we got. Shannon says magic items are how the characters really differentiate themselves. I think this is something a lot of OSR players forget. Your character doesn't gain amazing bonuses. Yep. Electric Dream says, anyone know if there are any projects in the works for campaign settings? Good question. If you know, add that to the comments. I don't know if there are or not. We showed that there is Source of Victory working on this adventure. Actually, it's free. It's out right now. Lost Caves of the Worm Witch. So if you play the first free adventure, you can continue on to this one. And Sursa does some great writing.
Absolutely.
Then we have John Allen says, I found the quick start rules on the Arcane Library website back in September of 2022. Been trying to get my group to play it ever since. Might get to thanks to all this visibility on YouTube recently. Yeah, I hope you do, because I think they'll love it. And then Solar Rambling says, what I find with the modern D&D table versus the table of the late 70s and into the 80s, is there's less focus on the creative narrative. ShadowDark could take the system back, take the modern back to the older style. Yeah, I mean, it's all about, your character build, it feels like, and not about interacting with the world as much. And this definitely forces you to interact with the world much more. Okay, so we were looking at deities. Let's look at next here on the list is gear. And we already talked about how you can carry your strength score and gear slots. And basically everything that's useful takes a slot. So it's real quick, real easy to figure out what you can carry, which is important because you need to be figuring it out in the dungeon when you're trying to decide what you're going to pick up and take with you. There's only 3 versions of armor. I was kind of surprised by that. And I was kind of surprised that chainmail gets your full dex modifier. So there won't be as much plate mail wearing, but of course you can't guarantee you're going to have a high dex mod because all the rolls are random. And in the characters I've seen built, I've seen a couple of 18s, but one of the 18 characters with an 18 was tempered with 2 3s, so it can be pretty random. Weapon list, here we go, weapon list. And again, ranges are close, which is just 5 feet, so melee. If you have a crossbow or javelin or a short bow or a long bow, basically you can shoot at what you can see. So that makes that real easy to figure out. And then the close ones or the near ones are 30 feet away, like the spear. And I think the dagger, yeah. Some random tables, plenty of random tables in this, even in the preview rules. So level advancement. A lot of characters get things that get better every even level. And then you also get a new talent roll every odd level. So basically every level, something's going to get better. XPs come from treasure, and they're basically 10 times your current level to level up to the next level.
One of the interesting things about the
gameplay,
XP for treasure,
there's advantage and disadvantage like in 5e. Natural 20 is always a success, and a maximum success at that. It'll be a critical hit with a weapon doing double damage. With a spell, it'll do double damage on the spell. A natural 1 is always a failure. D6 for decider rolls. Luck tokens like inspiration. You have 1 at a time, and it's a reroll. So we're going through this with the 1D&D playtest where it's like it's advantage, but it's a reroll. They don't know what they want to call it yet. I think they just need to bite the bullet and call it a reroll. What do you think of that, David?
Yeah, well, it's the advantage mechanic, and it's.
You muted, David, if you're talking.
Oh, am I muted? I might have lost my audio.
No, you're good. You're good. I just couldn't hear.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's inspiration the way everybody plays it, or right. As it's commonly played with. You can get a reroll.
And Electric Dream says, love the titles for the adventure modules, classic and cool. Same here. Everything's classic and cool about this. Okay, then back to the rules here. Using your stats, making checks, time. Oh, one ethos of the game is that time is real time. So when you light a torch and it's going to last an hour, that'll be an hour of actual playtime. And it's an hour in game as well. And that worked pretty well.
It works great because in the old game, they had the 10-minute turns for the dungeon, and you'd kind of keep track of how many turns you use. It was important because wandering monsters come after every certain number of turns, but it's also sort of a bookkeeping hassle, and it's hard to tell how long it takes to, say, a search a 60-foot corridor. There's rules for it, but how long is it going to take to interact with all these things? I think this is a great simplification that keeps the player's intent on the time pressure that's inherent into the game. And the time pressure comes from wandering monsters that are coming up periodically. So people are encouraged to move quickly, even in the even in the real world as they explore, and that keeps the game moving quickly, and it keeps the tension up. It's a nice way to handle it.
Yeah. I know there's multiple times in the first game we played where it's like, do we really want to keep searching or do we want to move on?
Absolutely.
Yeah. There's always there's the time pressure and the wandering monster pressure, because the wandering monsters aren't just trivial things that you can, spend no resources and defeat. They're things that could kill you, and they don't carry treasure with them, so you're not going to get any XPs for them. So that's really good. Turn order. In the game, they establish initiative, and then you just circle the table for initiative. I think that works good in a setting where it's hard to track initiative, but in Roll20 it tracks it real fast and real easy. So I just kept doing initiative the old way. I don't know. Would you rather see it done the way they suggest, David?
In Roll20, it's easier just to see the list on the screen.
Yeah.
On a table in the real world, go around the table by all means.
There's some interesting metagaming there. So if you're sitting down at a table, do you put your highest initiative modifier to the left of the DM in order that hopefully they roll the highest and the whole table goes before the DM goes? So you can kind of play those games if you're actually in a real physical setting.
I do like that during the exploration phase of the game, people are taking turns doing their thing. That's a great change from the collar that was introduced in the early game, and I don't think many people used, but it certainly was something necessary to have somebody speaking for the party when you had parties of 12 or more players crowded in the kitchen table trying to play the game. It's nice to have everyone get a chance and a turn to play and have that sort of order.
Yeah. Got a super chat. This might be my first super chat ever. Thanks, Shannon, for the $2. And thanks for the map, Shannon says. So I did the map for this adventure. You're welcome, Shannon, very much. The map was drawn because they weren't really concerned about the grid. So I kind of stretched it out and morphed it so it would match the grid better. And I have that on my YouTube channel in the description of either the DM tips or the actual live play. You can grab a copy of that map if you want to use it for your use, because I like the grid, unlike all the Theater in the Mind people. All right, back to the adventure here. So crawling darkness is a thing, and it was really like another monster that you had to overcome, or another challenge to overcome in the adventure. Light sources were critical. Having enough light sources that you could keep the party together in the light was also an important thing, and having the leader with a light source was an important thing, and all that kind of played out using the built-in dynamic lighting in Roll20, which I don't normally use. What did you think of that? As a player, sometimes I don't know that players would like it because you can't see the map very well. What do you think, David?
I thought the whole lighting pressure and the considerations that we were forced to deal with really set a tone of how oppressive and dangerous this dungeon is. And I really enjoy that the game doesn't give any characters dark vision or something equivalent. So everybody has to worry about making sure those torches are lit. I think it's a great addition, and it reinforces the tension and the frightfulness of the underworld.
Yeah, I would love to see that come into 5e, actually. Have no creatures with dark vision. I mean, in 5e, if you have dark vision and you're not using light, you are at disadvantage on perception checks still. So if a DM tracks that, it incentivizes everyone using light, but it's such an advantage for you to be able to see and your opponents not to be able to see that if a party can have all dark vision, they often go without light. Okay, let's see here. Solar Rambling said the seating at the table for initiative gets disrupted because initiative is rolled for each encounter. The starting player would change. Yeah, definitely. I was just thinking if you had your best initiative roller by the side of the DM, you have the best chance of the whole party going before the DM. Then Shannon says, I love the dynamic lighting effect in your game. Keeps things creepy. Definitely. Now back to the rules here. We're going to look at spellcasting, and then I'm going to let Dave give some final thoughts, because we have a game we're going to be playing here in about 20 minutes, and so we'll need to wrap this up. So if you have any final questions for us, please put them in the chat, and let's look at spellcasting. So spellcasting. Casting a spell takes your action, and you roll a d20 plus intelligence or a d20 plus wisdom, depending if you're a wizard or a priest. And you have to get 10 plus the spell's tier, so 11 for your first level spells. If you succeed, the spell takes effect, and you can cast it again in the future. If you fail, the spell does not take effect, and you can't cast it anymore until you complete a rest. So you have spells you know, but there is no limit to how many times you can cast them. It's just basically how often do you succeed. If you get a 20, you're going to do double the damage. If you get a 1, you're going to have some sort of wizard mishap happen, or your priest spell won't function, and you'll have to pay penance to your god before you can cast it again. 5 gold pieces for a tier 1 spell, and the effective value of your penance would be 5 gold pieces. And we didn't have that in any of our first game, but I hope we get one today, so we can roll on this wizard mishap table and see what horrendous things happen to the wizard and their party. And then scrolls and wands you still have to roll for as well. And stuff on focusing there. If you fail a focus check, your spell ends, but you don't lose it. So you're not risking losing a focus spell every time you check. But if you critically fail a focus check, you do lose the spell. You can no longer cast it until you finish a rest. And there's the spells. So let's bring it in here, David. What are your final thoughts?
Well, here's what I like about ShadowDark. I think it strikes a really good balance of understanding the rules in the old school that made the game compelling, that made it a tense game where you delved into a place where any wrong move could kill you, and treasure could be around any corner, and you had to make sure that your lights lasted and that you had enough resources to escape the underworld before the darkness closed in and the wandering monsters found you and finished everyone off. I love that tension that it recreates. I love the resource management mechanic that it brings. On the other hand, it knows, the designers know where to go with updating the older mechanics to newer versions. So you don't have to worry about save versus wands or any of those arcane saving throw mechanics. You don't have to try and adapt to descending armor class. You don't have to try and figure out an initiative system that was so confusing that everyone adopted their own house rule for initiative, and so on and so forth. So I think they've really landed on a good spot of recreating the tension and the feel of that classic play style while capturing the streamlined and clarity of the new rules.
I don't think I could say it any better than you just said it, David. I think it really hit the sweet spot, and I'm really enjoying running it, and I look forward to running more of it in the future. And everyone check out dmdavid.com for a really good in-depth write-up of ShadowDark and what David's experienced so far. The link here, I played Lost Citadel Scarlet Minotaur, takes you to the live play of me running it for David and the rest of the players. And one last comment from online. David is spot on with that analysis. It is great to have tension at the table where players have to think about the delve rather than rush in without worry. That's it. All right. Thanks, everyone. Me and Dave are going to go play some ShadowDark now.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.